And also, are ramen noodles like the international student food? I mean, it's interesting.
Absolutely.
Hello and welcome to Think Like a Brand, our midweek quick shots of the Rockstar CMO F'in marketing podcast, where we discuss thinking like a brand, specifically in industries that often don't. Who are we? Well, in a moment, you'll hear from my chum Liz High, an insight ninja, marketing strategist, speaker and author who has worked with some amazing brands and more recently has focused on supporting fintechs, banks and credit unions to embrace brand thinking and is the co-author of Think Like a Brand, Not a Bank. And I'm your host, Ian Truscott, sharing the marketing street knowledge I've picked up in my 20-year career from techie to CMO, and you can find us on LinkedIn. Just search for Rockstar CMO or click on the links in the show notes, which you can find in your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.com. It's Wednesday, the 23rd of November, and for my US chums, enjoy Thanksgiving tomorrow. And this week, Liz and I have been discussing brands that embrace the principle of coach and compose. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Welcome back, Liz, to Rockstar CMO FM and our little Think Like a Brand mini-series. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Just fresh off England's opening World Cup game. So despite having to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to watch it, feeling pretty good.
Yeah, splendid, yeah, because it's still early Monday morning for you, but it was even earlier Monday morning for the game, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, there's a true fan for you. How are you Seattle doing? Isn't you're a big MLS fan as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we're not talking about about players. We're moving swiftly on from that one. Okay.
We're sticking with England. Well, welcome back anyway. Thank you very much for coming back on the show. This week, as we've discussed, we're going to dip into one of the principles from your book, Coach and Compose, which I remember you saying was your favourite principle. So that's cool. So let's dive into that. But for the people that didn't listen to the episode, which was about 3 weeks ago, explain Coach and Compose and that I think it was like your fifth principle, wasn't it, in the book?
It was indeed. Well remembered. So, yeah, the idea behind Coach and Compose is that, when you're thinking about innovation, you can't assume that customers will get it straight away. Mm-hmm. And there is an element of coaching people into trying new things, helping them to use them and helping them to really get value out of it.
Right.
And to me, that's a big part of what I'm seeing, kind of new brands, particularly kind of digitally focused brands in the financial services world, are really starting to hone in on financial education, financial planning and support.
Right. Which has been where your focus is. And I think when we talked about it a few weeks ago, from my perspective, from B2B perspective, I think we discussed somebody like HubSpot who really educated the world on what inbound is all about, right? So Coach and Compose can be like a content marketing strategy, can't it? It's how are you going to educate the market that your stuff is the good stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting. And if you look at one of the reasons that my brain started going to this is that my daughter's just started at UW, and our local grocery store is Whole Foods, and that's also our local grocery store. And one of the really cool things about them as a brand is how orientated they are on the community. Mm-hmm. how focused they are on organic produce, local produce, etc. And one of the things that they have is a community kitchen.
All right.
Where what they do is they actually pull people in and, they do a shopping basket and then they cook with the shopping basket.
Oh, wow.
So they had so they had all of the, well, obviously not all of the 30,000 UW students, but a group of students in and taught them how to make proper ramen.
Wow.
The kind of student diet.
Yeah.
But as part of that process, they taught them about shopping. They taught them about looking at, good ingredients, how to do the prep, and then how to be part of that notion of kind of community. And to me, that's a super good example of really coaching people. If you think about a new cohort that's moved into your community, and it's about coaching them into your store, into your ethos, and into your brand. And that just really got me thinking about this idea of teaching being an important part of being a successful brand.
Yeah, and also it fits in with their kind of because we also talk about the brand story or your brand values and stuff. It really fits that Whole Foods brand story, doesn't it? That they're interested in the well-being of students in that way, right? Yeah. And also, are ramen noodles like the international student food? I mean, it's interesting.
Absolutely.
My daughter went through the same thing. Yes, it's always with the ramen noodles. Yeah, so an international success. Perhaps we should talk about their brand one time. But so that was Whole Foods. But your focus, recently has been with financial institutions. What have you seen with that?
Well, I mean, again, it's interesting. Obviously, it was a recent personal experience. I've been really trying to think about, how I'm much more structured in my own finances. And, despite working in financial services for a long time, I've always been a bit of a refusenik for the whole kind of budget planning, management, So I guess you can teach an old horse new tricks after all. So I kind of spent last week just looking at a few of the kind of aggregator and education tools in the market. And the two that I really settled on was Truebill, which I think are super interesting. They are putting a lot of television advertising in over here, which is quite unusual for, a tool like that. We're seeing them, they're very heavy on social right now.
But for people over on this side of the water, what do Truebill do?
Oh, yeah, of course. So they are like a service. And what they do is you aggregate your accounts with them.
Okay.
And then what it does is it goes through and identifies all of the subscriptions and regular payments that you have.
Yeah.
And shows you how much you're spending on the wine subscription you never use, a runway clothes that you don't use often enough, the two Netflix subscriptions that you have in your household, etc. So,
I'm not even going to ask if it is your actual experience. That sounded very specific.
Yeah.
I must tell you that my wine subscription is definitely used, and I would be very surprised, Liz, if that wasn't the case with you as well. So.
Well, it's not used quite as much as it's costing, right?
So that's what Truebill does. It brings all that stuff together. So what's the education they're doing? How are they teaching people that that's a way that you need to be doing that?
So a lot of it comes into, they've got very strong messaging and positioning. They use, numbers that are interesting, that you can save $1,000 a year. And what else can you do with $1,000 a year? So they have this really compelling story that's backed up by data.
Right.
And my experience of going through that reflects the promise that they made in all of their advertising. So for me, that's a very strong brand story. It's a solution that delivers on what it promises as a brand. And it genuinely helped me think about my money in a really different way. Right.
So the coach and compose part isn't just about what we'd say is straight up education, like cooking classes at Whole Foods. It's actually a glimpse into the promised land of if you were to use our service in this way, then you could potentially have these benefits or outcomes for yourself, right? So it's educating people on the outcomes as much as anything else.
Yeah. And, I think that's, why they're successful, is that that's a very compelling story.
Yeah.
When saving $1,000 is a big deal for people right now in this current kind of economy.
Yeah.
So it's very timely. It's a good message, and it really is about pursuing that kind of financial wellness piece, which I think is really important right now.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that around the energy bills and stuff from the energy companies of the exact same thing. If you do these 3 actions, you'll save yourself 500 quid a month or a year or whatever it is. But you also mentioned Mint there. So Mint in the same space as Truebill. So have you been looking at these two guys side by side?
So different proposition. Mint does a little bit of the same thing that Truebill does.
Yeah.
But Mint is much more of, it's like your dashboard. So they're part of the Intuit family of products.
Right.
So I kind of leaned into them because I use their accounting kind of software for, the other parts of my life. And what they do really well is visualize your money for you.
Right.
So it's a similar principle. Aggregate all of your accounts, aggregate all of your credit cards, aggregate all of your investments, and we'll show you where you are in the world. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's a good place, sometimes not such a good place. but at least no.
Yeah. And that's not their core business, is it, with somebody like that? Their core business is to sell you other financial services, right? But they are providing you with something useful, a dashboard, everything aggregated, easy life. In return, for they will make money in the longer term selling you financial services. So and people forget that, don't they? They think that, I've got this access to this free dashboard, and they think that's the product. The product, that isn't the product. That isn't what this organization is selling. It's selling financial services like any other boring financial services organization. Right?
But what they do really well, and what I like about them, is they have a very extensive financial education program as well that starts at 101 levels and then goes deeper and deeper. So you can pretty much find the level that you want to learn at really easily. And I feel like they make their education, it's very consumable. It's in multiple formats, a lot of it video based, a little bit of reading. It's kind of it's like my perfect tolerance for learning about things that I may not have that much of a passion about, but they make it engaging and interesting.
Yeah. So those are the financial services examples for this week, but also going back to B2B, we were talking about HubSpot just a little while ago. But I know that you've been looking at Seismic, not Seismic. I keep saying Seismic for some mysterious reasons. And you've been looking at them. What was it that impressed you about them in terms of this coach and compose principle?
I mean, when I worked at Nimbus, we were a customer of theirs, and we used it for our sales enablement team. And it just is a very powerful tool that allows, and to your point, it allows the intersection of, good content with good sales conversation with AI.
Right.
So what it does is all of the sales calls and meetings, or, I used to get my presentations recorded from Seismic.
Yeah.
And it comes back and it analyzes and it scores against things like your brand message.
Wow.
Against your sales pitch deck, against the key drivers of buying. So what it does is, just by going through your normal selling approach, you're constantly being coached and you're constantly learning.
Right.
And to me, it's a very natural way of just getting salespeople to get closer and closer to successful outcomes. The outcomes of a good call, what's the structure of it? What words are used? What's the language that's used in it? becomes how you're evaluated. And then you're given feedback on how to make the next call more successful.
I think that's
so.
Really
it's like this culture.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because from a content marketing perspective, there's a lot of work, a lot of tools around how to optimize our marketing content, right? And measure what works, and what engages, what's attracting Google's attention and all those good things. But that's interesting that your sales presentations, that kind of down the pipe or content of when the rubber hits the road, when a human is talking to another human. It's really interesting. That's being evaluated with this tool.
Yeah. And, the within the tool, I mean, the idea behind it's really a platform.
Yeah.
And the idea is that everything is integrated into that platform. So it just becomes a place of knowledge.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've had a look at it before in my past when we've been looking at sales enablement tools. I've not been the buyer of those things in the past. So I've just made recommendations, and I've known a couple of people over there. It's this isn't an ad for Seismic, but these kinds of tools. I mean, we were just chatting on the show. I think it was last week. Who was I chatting to? It was about the fact that sales enablement is often missing from a marketer's agenda, right? Is we'll focus on everything else that needs to be done with a new message, new product launch, and all this kind of stuff. And then sort of sales enablement comes some way later, if it happens at all. And the consistency of that is important. So that coach and compose is then happening within the organization as well as with the customers. Yeah. That's very interesting.
And I think the part of what I really like about it is that, there's an AI component to it as well.
Yeah.
So that there's an element of, learning from successful calls and outcomes.
Yeah.
And, conversations are linked to close rates, to success rates. And it starts to become, it's an intelligence hub, actually, rather than thinking about it as a platform.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, there's probably a broader topic here, the way we're not talking about one single vendor and selling that. But I think that's interesting because I'm curious there of how much data one would need to drive that behavior. What does that all look like? But that's probably a discussion for another day. So that's cool. So we've gone back to Coach and Compose again. A couple more examples there, and it sounds like it's about taking people on a journey, really, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, I think that's with innovation and, if you can imagine at some point where, you thought that you would be able to just link every single one of your financial things, that you'd be prepared to do it, that it's safe and that it's secure. 5 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe you'd be like, no way, man.
Yeah.
But we've kind of been taught that this works, that it's successful.
That's
you're
true.
Seeing the outcomes of it. You're seeing the benefits of it. And, I had no qualms about just giving, these two new apps total access to my life.
Yeah, cool. Well, splendid. Another splendid conversation, Liz. And I know we missed a week, but shall we do this again next week? What do you think?
Let's do it again next week.
Splendid. And in the meantime, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Liz High. I think there's only one of me. And on our book website, which is called thinklikeabrandbook.com.
Splendid. And I'll include all those links in the show notes. Thanks very much, Liz. And I'll speak to you again next week. Let's hope that England continue to do well for the next couple of matches.
I'm sure they will.
Although you're going to be a bit split loyalties because isn't it? It's the USA. Is it next?
It is, yes. But no, I'm going to the George and Dragon pub, and I have a life-size cutout of Gareth Southgate in my living room right now. So I'm going to be making my British stance in wherever I end up watching the game.
Well, there you go. Look out for Liz in the George and Dragon in Seattle. Thanks, Liz. I hope you survive. I'll see you next week.
All right.
Cheers,
Easy.
So that's a wrap on this episode of Think Like a Brand, our midweek mini-series for the Rockstar CMO F'in marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott, and thanks to Liz for her insight and for you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. You can find all our contact details and a link to Liz's book in the show notes, and we are Rockstar CMO on all the socials. And if you like this, please help share the good news with a rating or review in your favourite podcast. I'll be back with our usual show on Saturday. I hope you join us for that. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks again for listening to Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.